The documentary Lola Salaya by Cara David offers a deeply moving narrative that explores the lives of elderly women incarcerated in the correctional institution for women. These Lolas, though often forgotten by their families and society, reveal stories of endurance, regret, and silent strength. As students studying applied ethics, we chose this video because it perfectly captures the complex ethical dimensions present in contemporary reporting, balancing truth with compassion, advocacy with objectivity. Our objective in analyzing this documentary is to explore how ethical principles are either upheld or challenged in the practice of journalism. Through the lens of the story, we reflect not only on the individual humanity of the incarcerated elderly women, but also on the broader systemic issues that call for ethical accountability. This report aims to identify the moral dilemmas involved in telling stories of the marginalized and to evaluate the reporter's decisions from the perspective of contemporary ethical standards.
Balancing journalistic objectivity and compassionate advocacy. This has been the primary ethical issue or dilemma faced in reporting the issue in the documentary of Cara David entitled Lola Salaya. Based on the article of Carter in 2024, the role of journalists is intended to give factual and neutral reports to the audience or individuals. This includes reporting without bias or free from personal opinions. As the documentary focused on incarcerating elderly women in the correctional institution for women, the reporter encountered various inmates who are mostly imprisoned for minor offenses. She had developed a strong connection with one of the inmates named Lola Petra. She had been imprisoned despite being unable to read and write as she was caught falsifying documents. This pushes the reporter, Cara David, beyond the role of an observer as she involves her emotion through using her platforms to appeal to the Pope for help in the hope that he will tell the President and grant parole on Lola Petra's case. This raises ethical questions such as, is it appropriate for a journalist to intervene in the story? Or does this compromise the integrity of her reporting? With that, the ethical difficulty or issue is partially resolved because it goes beyond impartial reporting and the area of personal participation. Even though the reporter's activities were motivated by a sincere desire to garner attention regarding the elderly inmates, this makes it difficult to distinguish between sympathetic advocacy and journalistic neutrality. Furthermore, it doesn't result in a complete constitutional amendment which causes structural issues for elderly in penal facilities. Nonetheless, a decision issued by the Department of Justice concerning the elderly female convicts indicates progress, but does not fully address the root cause of the problem.
Ethical considerations upheld. Blurring out the faces of inmates during interviews. At the start of the documentary, the faces of inmates who have been elderly at Dorm 12 of Correctional Institution for Women are intentionally blurred. The decision was made so that they will be private and dignified until they were no longer prisoners. In doing so, the documentary protects the inmates from unnecessary stigmatization or the potential negative effects that may result from being publicly identified before the entirety of their cases have been resolved. Through blurring faces and taking into account the identity of the portrayed subjects, the documentary minimized the risks of public stigma and ensured the integrity of the women. With this approach, the women were able to talk freely about their lives and their experiences without the burden of shame and exposure. Martinho 2021 indicates that maintaining anonymity is important to shield the vulnerable prison population from stigma and their dignity. In the same way, Fellner 2012 asserts that older inmates are at greater risk of being discriminated and subjected to abuse, hence making confidentiality a necessity of ethics. Respectful and compassionate interaction with inmates. Cara David relates to older inmates such as Lola Petra and Lola Rose with an in-depth empathy and respect. She doesn't just question them, she listens intently, she spends time on them and views them as a true human beings with a story and emotions. There is a sense she is sincere, that she really cares and not just doing the part of a reporter. For this reason, the Lolas are not made to appear vulnerable or pitiable by this. Instead, they seem like a woman who survived the hardship but still walked bearing strength and dignity. Cara's way does not make their stories pseudo-drama. Instead, it celebrates their humanity and tells their story with care and truth. Showing community support, Bayanihan. The documentary shows how often volunteers and community members deliver food and medicine to the old inmates, a sign of a strong bayanihan, a community spirit. People are ready to help and not expect something in return. This is how the entire society cares for the elderly. People step in to take care of them properly. These things of kindness are not done to seek recognition or reward, but done because of a true sense of responsibility and compassion. A sincere and constant interaction with the inmates established a bond of trust between them and Cara David. This trust enabled the woman to open up more sincerely compared to what they would usually do, thus a representation that was true and felt. As Ellis 2007 warns, rapport as well as trust building are crucial for ethical qualitative research, particularly working with a marginalized group of persons such as prisoners. Jukes also points out that true engagement encourages more genuine storytelling in prison studies. One of the saddest but most powerful scenes of the documentary is the story of Lola Rose, a blind woman who lived without relatives for more than 11 years. She relates her story through the documentary and one gets to see what she means by being forgotten. It also shows the kindness around her, like prison guards and volunteers taking care of her. From the documentary, one is able to realize that there is still compassion even in the cruelest places, and this is the reason why Lola Rose is able to pass into the grave unrecognized and she is made dignified even after her death. Transparency and informed consent. The documentary clearly portrays the continued relationship between Cara David and such as Lola Petra and Lola Rose during the entire filming process. This relationship is important because it means that the grandmothers consented to sharing their stories upon being informed. The film records not their ways at a particular time only, but follows up a visits to them after release, which indicates that they were involved and agreed to be with them for a long period of time to share their experiences. The documentary also catches a short personal moment such as Lola Petra's release and what happens after the presence of Miss Cara David. This means that there was trust between Cara David and the elders. It is an ethical practice of informed participation, meaning the grandmothers knew what they were. Providing context and avoiding sensationalism. The documentary delicately shares the stories of the Lolas, giving a comfortable context and background. It tells their story of life, insights that led them into imprisonment, and describes the prison conditions they were subjected to. It also upholds their legal and social cultural struggles they still encounter, most especially being elderly women in a justice system that in many ways ignores issues of age, health, and rehabilitation. Importantly, the film highlighted some long-standing problems in the Philippine legal system, including extended detentions, delays in court decision, and ineffective legal assistance, particularly for elderly and sick detainees. According to Amnesty International, systematic delays and lack of proper attention to elderly prisoners are two widespread ills that have to be addressed by reforming immediately. Use of prayer and hope. The inmates were depicted praying together and comforting one another. One could see how they gained strength from faith and from one another. These silent moments echoed perfectly, demonstrating that even out of the most desolate situations, people gain a comfort in a community and spiritual hope. According to Johnson et al. 2025, the role of faith-based programs and social bonds is crucial as coping mechanism that enhance psychological resilience in inmates. The role of community and spirituality in helping prisoners remain hopeful and dignified. These prayers share the Lola's personal faith as well as inner strength and liberation, and draw out their emotional and spiritual difficulties from the audience. A good example is when Cara David went to see Pope Francis, pleading to the Pope to show mercy to Lola Petra in person. That part of the story was treated with sincerity and respect. It demonstrates that even as the move for justice for the old woman went to the level of seeking justice in the courts, it did not stop at legal means, it also went to moral, spiritual ways.
Ethical considerations not observed. First is the emotional impact on the elderly people. The documentary shares deeply personal stories of elderly women who were imprisoned for years, many of whom suffered abandonment, isolation, and emotional hardship. Lola Petra, for example, recounts her past experiences of neglect and emotional pain. Revisiting these traumas on camera without emotional support can be mentally harmful. While the goal may be to raise awareness, such depictions must be handled with care, as they can risk re-traumatizing vulnerable individuals. This raises ethical concerns about the psychological impact on elderly subjects already coping with emotional difficulties. Study shows that individuals with past trauma are more prone to long-term effects like depression and anxiety, and exposing them to emotionally intense media settings without proper psychological care can be ethically troubling. Second is the poor living conditions. In the documentary, it was shown that the living environment of the elderly woman, especially Lola Petra, is shown to be unsanitary and unfit for their age and condition. The scenes depict cramped, poorly maintained spaces with limited access to proper hygiene and medical care. These harsh conditions make it difficult for the elderly to live with comfort. The lack of resources and support highlights how society neglects the needs of elderly individuals, especially those who have been institutionalized. This raises ethical concerns about how the elderly are treated and the environments they are placed in. Additionally, older persons in prison often experience unhealthy lifestyle and suffer from poor mental health due to poor living conditions, insufficient medical care, social isolation, and a lack of age-appropriate facilities, factors that highlights systemic failure to protect and uphold the dignity of elderly imprisoned individuals. Lastly is the justice system for the elderly. Most individuals shown in the facility are elderly women, highlighting the lack of consideration for how and when older inmates are granted release. Many, like Lola Petra, were imprisoned for falsifying documents despite being illiterate and reportedly manipulated into signing them. Her case reflects how the justice system can fail to protect vulnerable individuals. This raises ethical concerns about the system's failure to reassess the needs of elderly prisoners and its tendency to overlook them in unsuitable environments. Research shows that aging inmates face unique challenges such as poor health, cognitive decline, and inadequate legal support, which most justice systems are not equipped to address, that could lead to prolonged suffering and systematic neglect.
In general, the documentary Lola Salaya can be said to be very ethical. Cara David and her crew showed a lot of concern in maintaining the dignity and humanity of the old prisoners. The application of informed consent, respectful engagement, and non-sensational reporting indicates compliance with the fundamental principles of ethical journalism. Bearing the face of prisoners, refraining from the exploitation of vulnerable feelings, and depicting belief and community support in a real manner made the moral basis of the documentary stronger. While perhaps there were slight limitations or ethical concerns that were not delved into detail, this did not at all compromise the report's integrity. Instead, the documentary emerged as an example of advocacy journalism that educates and evokes emotions from its viewers without the transgression of ethical lines. It is a good reminder that ethics in reporting is not simply a matter of rule following, but about reporting with compassion, accountability, and honesty.